Jerusalem Press Club, JPC. Another one in the series, Israel is Alive and Kicking, this time with Dr. Thabet Abu Ras on the Israeli Arabs, Ramadan, and the coronavirus. Dr. Thabet Abu Ras is the director. He served on the board of Adallah and was the director of its Negev office, and he was involved in many initiatives for Jewish-Arab cooperation. And he holds a PhD in geography from the University of Arizona. Dr. Abu Ras will start with a short introduction, and then we'll open up for Q&A. To our guest and our viewers on YouTube, Ramadan Kareem. Dr. Abu Ras, please.
Thank you, Ori, for the opportunity. I would like just to start by saying that the corona crisis is global, and crossing borders doesn't differentiate between colors, gender, or nationality. Yet the Arab community in Israel is more vulnerable than others. I believe it severely hits low-income classes around the world. And the Israeli Bureau of Statistics already mentioned the figure that over 50% of the total Arab population are under the poverty line. So the Arab community is more vulnerable than the Jewish community because of unstable employment, because of low level of emergency preparedness. In the majority of previous national emergencies in Israel have been in the context of conflict, and the Arab has been excluded from crisis management. We can add the weakness of the Arab local government also in combating such crises, or lack of appropriate NGOs in the Arab community, lack of trust in the Israeli government, especially the police. All really contribute to the fact that the Arab residents, Arab citizens are more vulnerable than the others. The coronavirus reached the Arab society 2-3 weeks earlier than the Israeli society, the Jewish community. Unfortunately, the corona testing also started 2-3 weeks later. So while the government today is talking about exit strategy and talking about return to a routine, Arab officials believe that, we see that in the top of the list of the towns in Israel with the spread of virus, we can find several Arab towns. Yes, there are some Israeli officials talking about apparently the current corona wave has exhausted itself, but in the same time, Arab experts believe that the peak of the virus is ahead of us. So there are mixed messages that come from the government, despite the government knowing that the climax of the epidemic, it's ahead of us and will reach the Arab community in the first 10 days of May. So those mixed messages, I believe that if we can look to the measures taken by the government, which harsh measures that took by the government, which was welcomed by the Arab leadership, instead. And right now, starting first day of Ramadan, the government has decided to close the Arab towns actually, and to strict movement and businesses and within the Arab community, starting 6 o'clock in the evening until 3 o'clock in the morning. Again, I would like to emphasize that this measure was welcomed by the Arab leadership. At the same time, the Ministry of Education is slowly returning the kids to schools slowly, and in the 3rd of May, actually on Sunday, schools will start, kids will start to return early childhood, and the kids in first grades will start to return to the schools. When the climax of the epidemic, again, I'm emphasizing that, expected to reach us exactly nowadays. So this is why the Arab leadership already took a measure, okay, a countermeasure to announce a couple of hours ago, to announce a general strike and disobey the decision taken by the Minister of Education. Arabs will close the schools because they believe that opening the schools in this stage will harm the kids. So we just start after, I will say, a month of cooperation between the Israeli government and all its branches, the Israeli police in one hand, the Minister of Health measures and regulations, the police, the front, even the front command, the army, really, and the Arab community, they have a very good cooperation the last month. It seems to me that in the coming weeks we'll have kind of confrontation because they disagree, while with these mixed messages that really make a lot of problems. So we have certain challenges to face in our community, in the Arab community. And first challenge is how to convince people to continue to stay in their homes. We have to notice so far the Arab people really obeyed the instructions of the Minister of Health and stayed in their homes. And now they have to continue another 30 days when the Jews are slowly leaving their homes to outdoors. And also we have some worshippers in Arab community. The mosques already closed for the last month, and people got tired. It seems to me that I live very close to the major mosque in my hometown of Kalansawa. Elderly people start to return to the mosque, and even when the mosque is closed, it's still closed, they start to pray in the plaza outside in the yard, in the mosque yard. And this is a major concern. At the same time, we don't see always really harsh restrictions as the government announced. We need more police to enforce those regulations and the enforcement to be really implemented. There are issues of major concern of the Arab community. I would like to start by a political one, the fact the government is ratifying the mandate of the Shin Bet to monitor the movement of citizens in Israel, all citizens, by technological means through mobile phones. It's a very sensitive issue for the Arab community. Since the government now, there is a discussion, this issue, to extend the period that is ended this week, if it's to extend it or not. And we see that the government is really would like to do everything it could to keep the Shin Bet as the only possibility to follow, and even to expand that. And the Arabs feel that they have a bad experience of the Israeli Shin Bet, and they're scared that the Shin Bet will use its mandate to expand the inquiry over the Arab citizens. By the way, it's really a major concern for many democratic forces within the Jewish community. Also, there is a real concern that the Arab citizen may pay a higher price of the control of the coronavirus. Today, there is over 1.1 million unemployed citizens sitting in their homes. And we know that the high percentage of them are blue-collar industrial and service workers. These are many, among them, there are many Arabs. Unfortunately, Arabs are not high-tech people. We have to face that. And they cannot really work from home. So another major concern really the discrimination by the government. The government start to pay some compensation for local governments, for small businesses. The last decision is to pay, while the Arab citizen consists 20% of the total population, Arab local governments are getting only 1.7% of the total compensation of taxes, okay? Tax revenues, because there is kind of, the government is going to help the local government because businesses didn't work in the last couple of months, 3 months. So Arabs are getting very small amounts, small percentage of the compensation. And also there is a major concern if we talk about post-corona crisis, lack of credit and banking and services, and in the Arab communities really have a problem with that. It is limited and sometimes non-existent in certain areas. The black market is flourishing in the Arab community, and black market means more violence and crime, and it's a major concern really. And the police really cannot give always the real answer. I would like to give example from the Negev area, where the Negev residents, citizens of the state of Israel, the Bedouin citizens, are over 260,000 people, 260,000 people. Outside of Rahat, okay, outside of Rahat, the major city, there is no banks at all. There are no banks branches in the outside of Rahat. So people have to look for a credit and for loans from the black markets or gray market, and this can really reach to a lot of problems. There is a need for quick response, financial relief, grants, and to defer payments are needed. The situation in Arab society is really different. This is the message that we are trying to pass to the government, that they have to treat the Arab community as part of the Israeli society. When the government's talking about giving kind of relaxation, giving the permission for worshippers to worship, the number 19, why it's the number 19 chose? I'm telling you that only the Jewish worshippers in the mind that they can, there is the so-called minyan, 10 people. So if there is 2 minyans, 19 people can pray together. Well, in the Arab community, the Muslim community, communal prayer is preferable. People would love to pray together. The Arab community cannot pray with 19 people. They have to pray with hundreds of people, with thousands of people together. And this is a real problem. So there is kind of mixed messages. And sometimes the messages are intended to Jewish people and Arabs. Really, that nowadays you are a media people, I can tell you that one of the good things that is taking place right now within the Arab society, that Arab citizens return to use and to actually to consume Israeli Hebrew media. Okay, one more good things that happened from the Israeli point of view, that there is a process of, I will say, the corona crisis enhanced the Israelization of the Arab citizens. They became more Israelis. They feel like Israelis. We are sharing the same crisis, and we are actually giving our share in fighting the crisis. Look to the figures and the numbers of Arab doctors and the staff in the hospitals. Well, while the Arab communities consists of 20% total population, I'm telling you, the figure is around 30% of the people who are fighting the coronavirus are Arabs, who are doctors, nurses, pharmacists, even staff people. And the Arabs really proud of that. They are very proud of that. They are part of the fight. So all in all, I would like to end by saying that this year, 2020, brought to us a couple of chances that we really would like to think about that. Arabs feel that this coronavirus treated everybody equally. We all under one threat, okay? And so we are equal, Jews and Arabs, okay? We cannot talk about discrimination here. Coronavirus is hitting everybody, okay? And we are fighting together against this virus. And the second opportunity 2020 brought to us the fact, the election, okay? One of the great moments in the state of Israel, it's the election day, where Jews and Arabs have the same right to vote. They are voting, they have one person, one vote, okay? And they feel, following the last election, they became more powerful, more engaged. Their issues on the agenda, the issue of legitimation, the issue of legitimacy is on the table of Israeli society, Israeli media. You probably noticed that the issue of Arabs being part of the bloc, part of the government or not, it's an issue. So we feel that we are Israeli citizens, part of the whole game for the positive and the negative way. And still we have also criticized the government for discrimination sometimes and for not paying enough attention and coming for example, for coming 2-3 weeks late to the Arab community for testing, coronavirus testing. I would like to stop here and give you the opportunity to ask questions. I know that we have half an hour, not more than that, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. So one question is about the presence of more police forces than usual in Arab towns and villages, and usually there was mixed sentiments towards the presence of the Israeli police in the Arab sector. You think moving in more police officers into Arab communities where you'll have a lot of young unemployed will not cause problems?
Well, so far, so good. I believe that the fact that the police this time, and even more than that, the front command, okay? Front command is part of the Israeli IDF, Israel Defense Forces. With their uniform are wandering in the Arab towns, it's welcomed since they came for positive purpose. And I would like here to say, to praise even the front command for their help to the elderly people distributing food in the Arab community. Yet, there's a lack of trust because still we don't see, even we have more police forces in the Arab towns, yet we see the crime rate is not going down. It's a major concern. The crime rate, the crime and the violence in the Arab community, even in Ramadan, even now in my town, we can hear guns and shootings every night, and it's a major concern. All in all, like I say, so far so good. Hopefully, it's an opportunity for actually for the police to build the trust with the Arab community. It's an opportunity for the Arab leadership also to build the trust with the police. Hopefully, the two parties will take this opportunity.
There's a tendency to make the analogy between the Arab sector and the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox sector, because they keep to themselves. There's a cultural gap between them and the mainstream Israeli majority. And also they uphold the communal aspect of life. They want to pray together, they want to celebrate together. Do you agree with this kind of analogy?
No doubt, there are several similarities with the Haredic people. No doubt about it. We are communal. We love to eat together, to be together, to a communal prayer. However, from the first day, the Arabs obeyed the law and the regulation. We didn't have even one single confrontation with the police as we saw that in the Haredic community. So far, as I said, so good, but we have to keep that. I believe that a problem that maybe will come from the government with these mixed messages, okay? We need one law for everybody. We have to take care of the towns, Arabs and Jewish towns with high rate of epidemic, okay? We have to take, but we cannot really, we have to be careful with collective punishment. And also it's very important for the Arab community that the police and the front command is doing everything with cooperation with the local governments, with cooperation with the municipalities. And this is what's taking place right now on the ground. So there are some similarity in the behavior. However, the conduct of the Arab community so far, I can give a high grade for the Arab community for its cooperation. And there is still, I don't want to expand that to discussion. I believe there is a major difference between the Arab community and the Haredi community. The Arab community is knocking on the doors of the government to be integrated. They are striving for equality and they would like to integrate in the workplace, in the universities, in the hospitals. This is not the case with the Haredi people. This is my opinion.
The police forces in larger numbers than usual in the Arab towns and villages will probably go away when the corona crisis is over. But you think there will be some lasting effect in terms of crime, domestic violence, illegal arms that have been inflicted the Arab community?
Well, I can say that one of the outcomes of the coronavirus, we can see some negative, also not only positive, but also negative phenomena. We see that violence within the family went up. It's skyrocketing. It's even 6-fold, 7-folds than the normal, okay? And it's a major concern. But the police response in the issues of the violence within the family, it's good, always has been good, okay? This is not the case with the gun shootings and this kind of things. I would like to hope that in the end of this crisis, we'll see better relations between the Israeli police and the Arab community. I again emphasize it's an opportunity for the two parties, especially for the police. Again, so far so good. Hope we'll see if there is no problem next week when the kids will not obey the government decision to return to schools because of fear, and also hopefully people will have the power to continue. Ramadan is something very special. We have to understand in Ramadan, most of the Arab activities, religious and social activities are taking place in this month. And all of a sudden we are asking people to stay home. Imagine a 75 years old man that just accustomed to go to the mosque 5 times a day to go to pray. All of a sudden say, stay home. Okay, he will say, I have stayed home 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I got tired, okay? And the question how the police will tackle these issues with these differences. I believe that the police is more sensitive nowadays because of Ramadan also. It's more sensitive because of the coronavirus. And the police comes in a positive way. Hopefully this will continue.
Is there a difference in the way Arab Israelis and the Jewish Israelis view the threat of the coronavirus? I'll give an example. For example, taking people who've been afflicted out of their homes and families, or stigmatizing somebody who's been inflicted, or staying together because this is stronger than any government regulation. Is there a difference here?
Yeah, I believe there is some differences. Still, many Arab people perceived the being infected as something very negative, that they should hide that. And not everybody really reported the infection, and it also caused some problems. So I believe the Jewish community in large, putting aside the Haredic Jews, are more open than the Arab community in dealing with this issue. Also, many Arabs are still, while they are really infected, they prefer to stay home and take care of themselves. They trust the family more than anybody else. So the family is taking care of them. They can take medicine and stay home, be isolated at home, rather than going to hotels or hospitals and so forth.
Are you aware of the collaboration between the government of Israel and the Palestinian Authority on fighting the corona? And also on a personal level, do you know people doctors who cooperate between each other this time?
Well, right now there is kind of curfew. Nobody can enter the West Bank, and nobody can come from the West Bank to Israel. There is a real border now. What I see, and I listen to the news from Ramallah and from different channels, that the Palestinian authorities is doing good job, and nobody really knows which kind of cooperation, but I believe that since the corona cannot differentiate and cannot stop by borders, I think that the Palestinians taking a lot of restrictions, even harsher restrictions than here, okay? And the situation, the economic situation there is even more harsher than here. I know I have a family in Gaza, and in Gaza there is so far no coronavirus. There is no real epidemic there, yet Hamas government took some measures. They closed the mosques, they closed everything, actually, just to as a precautious actions of the crisis.
Back to the fact that so many of the doctors, nurses, health workers are Israeli Arabs, and people notice it. People realize that there was the ceremony just on the eve of Yom Ha'atzmaut, Independence Day, in which their contribution was highlighted. Do you think this is something momentarily, something that is just related to the current crisis, or it will have a ongoing, lasting effect on Arab-Israeli attitudes in Israel?
Well, I believe that there is kind of more integration in the Israeli hospitals, in the Ministry of Health in Israel, than other ministries or public offices. And we can see that of the numbers of Arab doctors in the hospitals. No doubt that there are more Arabs in the hospitals, more Arabs in the universities and the colleges, more Arabs are working. The Arab citizens today is stronger than a decade or 2 decades ago. And this has, the Arab middle class is increased in numbers and its size within the Arab community. Arabs also aware of being, they have to demand their citizens and equality from the Israeli government and the Israeli establishment. However, having said all of these positive things, the fact that still the political environment, it's kind of toxic political environment, incitement against the Arabs, as we saw just 1.5 months ago, okay, 2 months ago in the election campaign by the right wing, okay, it's still affecting the Arabs. I can say, hopefully, the issue of better relations between Arabs and Jews in Israel is heavily rely on the shoulders of the government and the leaders, political leaders, First of all, the Jewish political leaders, what the Arabs really look for today, more inclusive messages to come from the leadership, political party leadership, mainly Gantz and Netanyahu and others. And again, also it depends on the Arab leadership too, not only the Jewish leadership. But I believe that the situation today is better than a decade or 2 decades ago. Still, we have to combat some legislations, the national state law, for example, that discriminate against us, and others still there. I believe that things changing in the right direction, but there is kind of polarization within the Israeli society, and there is a very important role for the Arab community to try to build the peace camp within the Israeli society.
With these happy notes, I want to thank you, Dr. Thabet Aburas, for taking the time being with us. I know you're fasting, but iftar is coming soon, so wish you, Ramadan Kareem, and thank you all for being with us. Stay tuned to our next webinars early next week, which will deal with the developments in the Supreme Court. Thank you very much for being with us. Goodbye.
Thank you for the opportunity. Bye-bye.